Last year we set ourselves the challenge to design the ultimate UK hardtail. The UK has got a bit of a reputation and a heritage in hardtails, and we thought that with our knowledge of riding, racing, testing, all sorts of different bikes, we could have a pretty good go at designing what we thought was the perfect one for all the types of terrain you encounter in British riding. To do this, myself and the MBUK team got in touch with the Bicycle Academy in Frome. They're a frame building school in Somerset, and luckily they were just as excited about the idea of the project as we were. Now I'm going to outline the 5 hardest things about building a bike, and obviously the first one comes to deciding what to do. There's so many different types of bikes out there and they do so many different things that building one bike that's going to do everything as well as it can do is going to be a tricky task. As people who ride and test all sorts of different bikes, we've all got a pretty good idea of what we like. So what we thought we'd do is we'd combine the knowledge of the MBUK staff, the BikeRadar test team, and also the knowledge of the Bicycle Academy. But also we didn't want to make sure we weren't living in an echo chamber, so we asked the MBUK readers what they thought constituted the perfect hardtail. The hard thing is though, combining all these ideas into something that's actually going to ride properly. Some people want a super long bike, some people like something short and snappy, and obviously one bike isn't going to do it all. So in the end, it was kind of down to me to sort of figure it all out and put all these things together. But luckily I had Tom Sturdy, who's the head teacher at the Bicycle Academy, to help me out. And it was definitely invaluable to have his expertise. So this brings me to the second hardest point of designing a bike, and it's where you start. You've got all these different angles, numbers, and how do you start putting them together into something that's actually going to make a decent bike? There's a great program for doing this, and it's called BikeCAD, and it's a very simplified computer-aided design program where you can input the numbers and it'll tweak the geometry of the bike and it'll change it on the screen, and you can also check loads of little problems. You can look at it from plan view, so you can check the tyre clearance, all sorts of things like that. We spoke to Tam Hamilton at BTR Fabrications, who share workshop space with the Bicycle Academy, and he told us the place to start is bottom bracket drop. Well, this was his advice. So we started with that, which we wanted really low for good cornering stability, and then we worked out from there. Chainstay length, nice and short, fast cornering, and also because it's a hardtail and you haven't got the benefit of the rear suspension, you want something you can get your weight back on so you're not getting pitched forward on the descents. Our theory is, although bikes should be fast, and fast is fun, hardtails are never going to be as fast as full suspension, so the fun element really has to feature highly. For this reason we decided not to go super long at the front end, and also, because we're all sorts of different heights on the MBUK team, we wanted a bike that everyone can ride. So for the reach we went for a fairly middle of the road kind of 450, and we also didn't go too long on suspension fork travel, because as a hardtail pivots on the rear axle, if you go too far at the front it really upsets the trail and pitches you over the front on steep tracks. Number 3, the other hardest thing about building a bike is what do you actually make it of? There's lots of differing opinions of what's best: aluminium, carbon, steel, titanium. There's a big history of UK bikes being made from steel, and that's for good reason. The first one is ride quality. Because steel can be used in much thinner walled, smaller diameter sections than aluminium to achieve the same strength, it gives you that compliant ride which people really associate with it. The second reason is that it's just so widely available here. This means you've got so much more control and choices over all the different tubing sizes you get, the butted tubing, the lengths, the preformed sections, all that kind of thing, which in the end gives you more control over the bike you're going to make. Now titanium is also a great material for having good ride quality, but it's prohibitively expensive, and because I've never made a bike before, it's really hard to TIG weld titanium well, and especially doing it first time. This would mean we could spend about £900 on tubes, and then I could screw it up at the end, which would not be good. The fourth hard thing about making a bike is actually making it. Now that sounds quite obvious, but there's some processes which are really simple, like cutting the tubes to length and working out the miters, which can all be done by downloading and printing off templates from the BikeCAD program. In case you don't know, a mitre is the cup-shaped joint at the end of a tube which allows it to fit onto another circular tube. Now it's where filing the miters is where you actually have to be really accurate, because a few file strokes can be the difference between a tube fitting really nicely to the one next to it or going too far and having a gap which really would compromise the strength of the frame. So after designing the frame and then 4 days of cutting, mitering all the tubes, making it all fit together properly, obviously the big scary part is brazing it together. Now luckily I'd had a bit of brazing practice every morning through the week leading up to the big day, because the Bike Academy's ethos is that you don't learn by watching someone do something, you learn by doing it yourself. So I brazed quite a lot of test pieces, made quite a lot of mistakes, and they tried to get me to work out why things had gone wrong and then work out how to overcome those. So actually, even though by the time I did get to brazing my final frame, I thought it was going to be a pretty terrifying process, and it was actually probably one of the most enjoyable parts of the whole thing. Just seeing it all come together and seeing the flux flow into the joint and seeing the perfect fish scale joint appearing is something you never think you're going to actually be able to do. It's something you think is reserved for the pros, and it's pretty great that at the end of a week you feel like you can actually make something that maybe isn't the most beautiful brazing job in the world, but something you're pretty happy with and is definitely, according to the guys there, easily strong enough to be ridden. The fifth hardest thing is actually making sure your frame's strong enough to ride. Now, as the person who's brazing the frame, you are the only one who knows that the filler rod, which you use to fill up the gap between the two tubes, has fully penetrated into the metal and has bonded onto each side evenly. You're the only one that knows that, so it's pretty intimidating when you take the bike out for the first time, jump on it, fully built, fully painted, you spend a lot of time on this, you really hope it's not going to snap. Not just because you don't want to lose your front teeth, but it's a bit of a labour of love by this point. I'll go into riding the bike and how it felt in a little bit, but first there's a few definitely important things that I learnt along the way which you should really watch out for if you want to build your own bike. The first thing is to iron out all the potential issues right at the outset. Check your design, check it from loads of different angles, print it out, check it over, match the tubes up to it. You really don't want to realise that you haven't got enough tyre clearance or chainring clearance and the back end geometry you've designed doesn't work halfway through the build. The second thing is to make sure you get your BB shell around the right way. The Bicycle Academy say it's not unheard of for people to put the BB shells onto the jig the wrong way around and only realise when they come to thread the bottom bracket in way down the line that they've put it on backwards. And the last thing, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's measure twice, cut once. And you've got to be patient. Don't make mistakes, and it's very easy, especially with things like mitering tubes, to just think, oh, I've got quite a lot of material to take off, get a bit trigger happy with the file, and then realise that you've completely messed up the tube and got to start again from scratch. So for the build of the bike, we wanted to continue with the British theme, and the UK's got loads of great component brands, as well as obviously frame brands. 3 things you can't get in the UK are suspension fork, tyres and drivetrain. So these are 3 things that we sourced from just some of our favourite brands. So apart from these 3 parts, we spec the bike out entirely with UK made and or designed stuff. Quite a few brands like Hope, Rideworks and Superstar even did custom engraved parts for us to give that bike that little bit of extra bling. Now before building the bike up, we obviously need to get it painted. I didn't do this myself, I haven't got any bike painting experience, so we sent the frame off to Blue Whippet Cycles in Stoke-on-Trent, and Jason Rourke, who's been painting bikes for about 25 years, did an absolutely incredible job on it. When it comes to head tube badge, being MBUK, there was only one thing to put on it, and that's mint sauce. The sheep cartoon's been in MBUK for over 30 years now, so it seemed only fair and fitting that he should figurehead at the front of the bike. You'll spot on the video that the bike hasn't got the rental handlebars we spec'd on it. Now this is only because we lent it to our art editor Jimmer and he didn't quite bring the bars back in time. Being an aggressive do-it-all hardtail, we wanted a build kit to match. So we've used an array of parts from all these UK brands, like Hope brakes, pretty powerful, a rental bar and stem, got Hunt wheels, which are quite good value, quite wide profiles, so they sit really nicely with big chunky tyres. Rideworks hubs, which are made to impeccable standards and hopefully keep out the UK grime with really good seals. BikeRadar pedals, flat pedals, because I always ride flat pedals. Now with all that out of the way, we can move on to how the bike actually rides, because there's no point doing all this, designing it, making it, building it all up if it's going to ride rubbish. Well, luckily it didn't. It rode really well. And definitely took a little bit of getting used to after riding a lot of full suspension enduro long travel trail bikes, but once I started riding it and got used to it, couldn't keep the grin off my face. We've taken it all over the UK. First ride was actually up in Sheffield, where we did big Peak District ride, took it to the BMX track, taken it on some big all-day epics, and as we've seen in the video clips, we've been taking it down to some of our favourite South Wales downhill tracks. Starting at the front end, I think the things that we got really right about the bike is the head angle. At 64 degrees, it's super slack, much slacker than quite a lot of hardtails out there. And despite only having 130 mil of travel and no rear suspension, the bike corners like it's on rails, and it feels super stable when you start going fast. The other thing that helps this, as I mentioned earlier, is the really low bottom bracket. Now, there was a few little issues with catching pedals on the climbs, but once you get used to that and you get your cadence right to avoid those, it feels amazing, and it's definitely a compromise I'd be willing to have. Something I think maybe we went a little bit too short on is the chainstays. At 415 mil, the bike feels super snappy, but it definitely feels, when you start leaning over the back, feels a little bit unsettled, and I think you could get away with going a bit longer, having a bit more stability, but really not sacrificing much of the manoeuvrability. In the interest of keeping the bike clean and elegant, we went for fully internal cable routing. Now, around the bottom bracket area, what allowed us to do this was a T47 BB shell. In the bit larger diameter means that you can run the cables over the top and keep them fully internal. Now, what we did slightly wrong is, even though we sleeved the cables to make them easy to slide through, the entry and exit ports are a little bit tight, and we have ended up damaging some of the cable outers. Going back to what the bike's made of, at the front triangle it's made of Reynolds 853 tubing, and at the rear we used Italian-made Columbus stays, which are pre-formed chainstays. Now, we actually, interestingly, we used chainstays for both the chainstays and the seat stays on this bike, as we advised it give us a bit more rigidity and a little bit more stiffness, because this is a bike we wanted to ride really hard. Now, this is definitely something you notice on the trail, but it's possibly something I think we've maybe slightly overbuilt the rear end, and a little bit more flex might have been good. So in summary, did we end up making the ultimate UK hardtail? Well, probably not, because I don't think there is an ultimate UK hardtail. As I said at the outset, there's so many different types of riding, disciplines, opinions, that it's never going to be able to make the perfect bike. But what I do think we have made is a pretty damn good bike for what we like to do, and that's aggressive, mucking around in the woods kind of riding with your mates, but still a bike that you can take down a downhill track, take on a big cross-country ride, take an all-day epic and have a great time on. The hardtail's a pretty versatile machine, and I think we got pretty close to making a good stab at that. So what do you think of our bike? What do you like about it? What do you hate about it? And what would you do differently? In fact, if you want to go and make your own and show us what you do differently, then you can do that at the Bicycle Academy. They run 7 or 10 day bike building courses, and they'll provide everything you need: materials, expertise, and like they did with us, they'll take you through the whole process from start to finish. So you come in with zero knowledge, and you'll finish the week with a bike that you can build up and go and ride. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so you get a notification every time we upload a new video.